Abigail had crossed oceans, the borders, and centuries, and she had learned, slowly and painfully, that every place worth feeding in announced itself long before the first drop of blood ever touched the ground. Cities breathed, villages murmured, even highways, stretching empty and indifferent beneath the moon, carried a faint static of human unease, like the residue of hands that had gripped the steering wheel too tightly while passing through at night. Fear left impressions. It soaked into walls, clung to street corners, pooled in basements and stairwells, and drifted lazily through bedroom windows where children pretended to sleep. Abigail did not need to think about it. She felt it the way others felt changes in the weather, the way predators sensed shifts in wind. That was how she knew, the moment she stepped into Derry, that something was wrong. The town did not flinch. She stood at the edge of Witcham Street, rain falling steadily around her, threading through her pale hair and darkening the soft fabric of her dress until it clung to her like a second skin. The night was cold, but the cold did not touch her, not really. It never did. Streetlights flickered overhead, not in a steady pattern but irregularly, as if responding to a rhythm that did not originate in the sky or the wiring above. The houses watched her, not openly, not obviously, but with the quiet patience of things that had learned to wait. No curtains twitched, no doors creaked. No dogs barked themselves hoarse at the unfamiliar scent of her presence. The town accepted her arrival with the same indifference it might have shown a passing cloud. Abigail frowned, just slightly. That alone would have been enough to make a wiser creature turn around. But Abigail had not survived as long as she had by mistaking absence for danger. She mistook it, instead, for opportunity. She smiled, a small, polite smile, the kind she wore when she wanted the world to underestimate her, and took her first step forward. Her ballet flats met wet asphalt, and for the briefest moment, the street felt wrong beneath her feet. Not cracked, not uneven, soft, as though the ground itself possessed a yielding quality, like damp soil or old flesh. She paused, then continued. Old towns settled. Old towns sank. Old towns developed quirks that younger places could not afford. Derry was old. She walked slowly, deliberately, allowing herself to be seen if there was anyone left who still knew how to look. Rain traced thin silver lines down her cheeks, down her arms, gathering at her fingertips before dripping soundlessly to the pavement below. With each step, the air grew denser, heavier, as though saturated with something invisible but immense. Memory, perhaps. She caught fragments as she moved deeper into the neighborhood, sensations without sources, impressions without origins. The ghost of laughter that vanished the moment she tried to focus on it. The echo of running footsteps that never crossed her path. The faint, imagined pressure of a door slamming shut somewhere underground. Basements. There were always basements. "This is not subtle," she said softly, her voice almost swallowed by the rain. "You're not hiding as well as you think." The sound of her own words felt foreign here, too bright and alive for a town that seemed to prefer quieter things. The buildings absorbed her voice without reflection, without echo, the way water swallowed stones. Abigail liked this part. The approach. The slow tightening of the net that came before realization. She had followed the scent for 3 nights. Not blood, not exactly, but something adjacent to it. Something older and thicker. Fear that had been pressed down, layered, and allowed to age until it developed complexity. Fear that lingered long after the moment that created it had passed. That kind of fear never belonged to humans alone. It belonged to something that stayed. At the intersection ahead, she noticed the storm drain. It sat at the curb like an open mouth, iron bars slick with rain, black water swirling lazily beneath as though stirred by something far deeper than runoff. The rain poured into it in steady streams, but the sound it should have made, splashing, rushing, urgency, was absent. The water disappeared without complaint. Abigail stopped walking. She did not feel fear. Not yet. What she felt was attention. A subtle shift, like the moment a conversation stopped just out of sight, like the instant before applause began in a darkened theater. The sensation brushed against her awareness and lingered, curious and unhurried. Then came the sound. Clapping. Slow, measured, deliberate. Each clap landed with soft precision, echoing faintly off brick and concrete, as though the town itself were participating in the gesture. The applause was not enthusiastic, nor mocking. It was patient, amused. "Well," a voice drifted upward from the darkness below the grate, rich with warmth and something like genuine delight. "You really do not see that every century." Abigail tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. From the storm drain, something rose. Not climbed, not emerged. Rose. The figure ascended as if lifted by invisible strings, rain sliding off bright fabric that should have looked ridiculous, but did not. A clown stood before her, tall, impossibly thin, his posture relaxed in a way that suggested absolute comfort with the space he occupied. His costume was a faded riot of color, as though it had once been cheerful and had learned better over time. His smile was wide, too wide, perfectly practiced. His eyes were yellow, ancient, and entirely uninterested in pretending otherwise. He regarded her the way she usually regarded others, with appetite. "Pennywise," he said, bowing slightly, one gloved hand sweeping outward in a mockery of old-world politeness. "But you can call me whatever makes you feel safer." Abigail studied him carefully. She smelled illusion immediately, layers of it, stacked and woven together with meticulous care. Faces behind faces, forms behind forms. He wore the shape of the clown the way a man might wear a coat, because it was useful, because it was familiar, because it invited certain reactions. But beneath it, nothing. No heartbeat, no warmth, no blood humming beneath skin. It was like staring into a mirror that refused to reflect. "You're not human," Abigail said at last, her voice calm, observational. Pennywise's smile deepened, stretching just a fraction further than anatomy should have allowed. "Oh, sweetheart," he replied softly, stepping closer. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all night." The distance between them closed without either of them moving. Abigail felt it then, the city bending, subtly, imperceptibly, as though leaning in to listen. The streetlights flickered again, slower now, sinking to a rhythm that beat far below the pavement. "You're standing on my dinner plate," Pennywise continued, tilting his head. "And you do not even smell afraid." Her lips curved, revealing the faint suggestion of fangs. "I do not need fear," she said. "I drink blood." Pennywise chuckled, the sound low and pleased. "Oh," he said, "I know." And somewhere deep beneath Derry, something old and vast stirred, not with hunger, but with anticipation. Abigail had faced creatures that called themselves gods. Some wore crowns, some wore shadows. Some hid behind scripture, behind rituals, behind the desperate devotion of those who needed monsters to make sense of the dark. They had all made the same mistake. They had wanted her to kneel. Pennywise did not. That realization settled into her slowly, like cold water seeping through fabric, touching skin long before the mind accepted what the body already knew. He stood before her with the casual ease of someone who did not need to prove anything, and the city, his city, held its breath around them. Rain continued to fall, but it felt distant now, muted, as though the sound had been turned down rather than silenced completely. Abigail became aware of how still everything else was. No wind, no passing cars, no distant sirens. Even the trees lining the street remained frozen, their leaves suspended in mid-shiver. A stage. "You're interesting," she said finally, allowing a note of genuine curiosity to color her voice. "But you're still wearing a face." Pennywise's eyes flicked over her, bright and unreadable. "Everyone wears something," he replied. "Yours just happens to be very pretty." She took a step toward him. The space between them distorted, not visibly, not in any way she could point to, but it stretched nonetheless, like a hallway that lengthened the closer you came to the door at the end. Her foot met pavement that felt increasingly unreal, less solid with each step, as though she were walking across the surface of a thought rather than a street. She stopped again. That was new. Abigail had always trusted her body more than her instincts. Her body remembered what it was to hunt, what it was to tear and drink and survive. It remembered things her mind had long ago set aside. Now her body hesitated. Pennywise noticed. His smile softened, becoming almost fond. "Oh, do not stop on my account," he said. "You came all this way." The houses around them seemed closer now, though neither had moved. Their windows reflected the streetlights, which flickered once, twice, then steadied. Abigail caught her reflection in the glass of a parked car and frowned. For just a moment, she thought she looked blurred. She shook the thought away and moved again, faster this time, deliberately pushing past the sensation of resistance. The distance collapsed. She was suddenly close enough to smell him. Not rot, not blood, not the copper tang of fear she had expected. What she smelled was depth, a layered, suffocating absence that made her hunger recoil rather than surge. Pennywise did not smell like prey. He did not smell like a predator either. He smelled like an ecosystem. "You do not belong here," she said, baring her fangs now, letting the truth of herself bleed through the veneer she wore so easily. "Whatever you are, you're feeding on scraps, on children, on leftovers." The word children landed heavily, sinking into the street like a dropped stone. Pennywise's smile did not falter. "Scraps?" he echoed mildly. "Is that what you think they are?" Something shifted beneath them. Not the ground, not exactly, but below it. A distant movement, vast and slow, like the roll of something enormous turning in its sleep. Abigail felt it through her feet, up her legs, into her spine. The city exhaled. "I do not take what's weak," Pennywise continued. "I take what's ripe." She struck then, not out of panic, not out of fear, out of certainty. Abigail moved faster than thought, her body folding space the way it always had, her hands closing around his shoulders with enough force to shatter bone. Her mouth found his throat, fangs sinking into flesh that yielded just enough to convince her it was real. For a heartbeat, she tasted something. Not blood. Memory. A flood of it, basements and gutters, dark closets and whispered prayers, scraped knees and the slow, suffocating realization that no one was coming. The taste was overwhelming, layered so thickly it drowned out her own senses. Then Pennywise laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly. He laughed the way one might laugh at a clever child who had finally solved the wrong problem. Abigail recoiled, tearing herself free, her hands slick with rain and something else she did not want to name. Her hunger faltered and twisted into confusion. "There it is," Pennywise said, his voice warm with satisfaction. "That little hitch in your breath. You felt it, did you?" The street bent. The houses leaned closer, their foundations stretching downward impossibly, sinking into a darkness that should not have fit beneath them. Abigail felt the city rearranging itself, not physically but conceptually, redefining where she stood and what that meant. "You're not feeding on me," she said, backing away now without quite realizing she was doing it. "You can't." Pennywise took a step forward. This time, the distance obeyed him. "Oh, I'm not feeding on you," he said gently. "Not yet." The words "not yet" wrapped around her like a promise. Fear brushed against her consciousness, light, tentative, unfamiliar. She snarled, forcing it down. "I've been alive longer than your town," she said. "Longer than your stories." Pennywise's eyes softened. "That's what makes this special," he replied. "You still think time belongs to you." The rain slowed, then stopped altogether, droplets hanging in the air like suspended thoughts. Abigail reached out instinctively, her fingers passing through one without disturbing it. The world was no longer pretending. "You feel it now," Pennywise continued. "That pressure behind your eyes, that question you do not want to ask." She did feel it. A subtle erosion, a thinning, not of her strength, but of her definition. She had always known what she was. The certainty of that had carried her through centuries of fire and blade and prayer. Now that certainty wavered, as though the edges of her identity were being gently sanded down. "What are you?" she demanded. Pennywise leaned in close enough that she could see herself reflected in his eyes, small, sharp, and suddenly very finite. "I'm the reason you learned to drink fear," he whispered. "I'm what taught the dark how to wait." The city pulsed once, deeply. Somewhere far below, something enormous shifted again, and Abigail understood, not fully, not yet, but enough to feel the first true curl of dread take shape in her chest. For the first time in a very long life, she considered the possibility that she had not come here to hunt. She had come here to be processed. Abigail had always believed that fear was a language spoken only by the fragile. It was something she had outgrown long ago, shed like a useless organ, like a childhood superstition that no longer applied to a creature who could tear through locked doors and drink centuries from a single throat. Fear belonged to the hunted, to the temporary, to those who had something left to lose. Yet as he stood there, suspended in a moment that refused to move forward or back, she realized that fear had never truly left her at all. It had only been waiting for a speaker fluent enough to pronounce her name. The rain finally fell. Not downward, but inward. It collapsed into the street, into the storm drain, into the unseen arteries beneath Derry, vanishing as though the town itself were swallowing. The suspended droplets dissolved, and with them went the last illusion that the world around her still operated according to rules she understood. Abigail turned, intending to run. The concept of a way no longer existed. The street had length, but no exit. The houses stretched upward and downward simultaneously, their foundations sinking into an impossible depth, while their roofs disappeared into a sky that had become too close, pressing down like the inside of a skull. Windows flickered with images that were not reflections, children staring back, mouths open in silent screams, faces that dissolved when she tried to focus on them. This was not scenery. This was recollection. "You feel it now?" Pennywise said behind her. His voice came from everywhere at once, from the drains, from the walls, from the narrow space behind her eyes where thoughts formed. He no longer bothered to walk. He simply was closer. Abigail spun, fangs bared, hands clenched, every predatory instinct screaming at her to strike, to tear, to do something. Her body obeyed. Her will did not. She lunged, and the motion stuttered, fractured into something incomplete. Her limbs felt delayed, like an echo arriving too late to matter. Pennywise caught her easily, one gloved hand closing around her wrist, not tightly, not violently, but with absolute certainty. The contact burned. It's not heat, recognition. "There it is," he murmured, examining her as one might examine a long-anticipated dish. "That moment when the hunger turns inward." She tried to pull free. She succeeded, technically. Her hand slipped from his grasp, but the sensation of being held lingered, as though the idea of restraint had already been impressed upon her. "You're afraid," he said. "No," she hissed. "I do not." The word died in her throat, because it was true. Fear bloomed inside her, slow and invasive, not sharp enough to panic, but deep enough to rot. It was not fear of death. She had died before. Not really, but enough to recognize the shape of it. This was fear of erasure. Pennywise stepped closer, and the clown facade finally began to fail, not dramatically, not all at once, but subtly, like paint cracking on an ancient wall. His smile remained, but it no longer belonged to a mouth. His eyes deepened, stretching into something that suggested distance rather than depth. "I do not kill," he said softly. "Killing is crude, temporary." The ground beneath them opened, not split, opened like a throat. Abigail fell. She did not scream. She could not. The descent was not fast, but it was endless. The walls around her were not dirt or concrete, but layers of memory compressed into form, school hallways, sewer tunnels, bedrooms at night, all overlapping, all pressing in. Faces appeared and vanished, their fear bleeding into the space like ink in water. She felt herself thinning as she fell, not weakening, spreading. Her hunger lashed out instinctively, searching for purchase, for something to drink, something to anchor herself to. She reached for the nearest presence she could feel, Pennywise, and found him already there, surrounding her, beneath her, within the space she occupied. "You drink blood," his voice said, no longer coming from any one direction. "But blood remembers fear, carries it, seasons itself with it." She struck again, biting, clawing, tearing at whatever part of him presented itself as flesh. This time, there was blood. Thick, cold, endless. She drank, and with it came the full weight of Derry. Every fear ever harvested here poured into her. Children lost in the dark, parents realizing too late, the suffocating certainty that something was watching from just beyond sight. It was too much, too vast. Her body convulsed as the fear overwhelmed even her immortal capacity. She tried to stop. She could not. Pennywise's laughter rippled through the space, not mocking, not cruel, but satisfied. "Yes," he whispered. "That's it. Take it all." The fear bloomed inside her until it eclipsed everything else. Her identity, vampire, predator, eternal, fractured under the weight of it. She remembered herself as she had been, and as she was, and as she would never be again, all at once. That was when Pennywise closed in, not with teeth, with presence. He enveloped her, reality folding inward as though she were being drawn into a collapsing star. Abigail felt herself being consumed, not torn apart, not destroyed, but incorporated. Her fear was stripped from her first, peeled away and tasted with reverence. Then came the blood, ancient, cold, rare. Pennywise drank deeply, savoring the richness of it, the way it carried terror not just from this moment, but from the dawning realization that even immortality had an endpoint. He fed until the hunger that had waited patiently for centuries finally eased. When it was over, there was no body left to fall, no scream to echo, no name to remember. The ground closed. The street reassembled itself. Rain resumed its proper direction. Witcham Street stood empty, quiet, unremarkable. Somewhere beneath it all, Pennywise settled back into himself, sated and content, the taste of fear lingering pleasantly. In the weeks that followed, children in Derry would wake from dreams they could not explain, their hearts racing, their mouths tasting faintly of iron. Vampires, monsters, things that went bump in the night would feel a sudden, inexplicable urge to stay far away from this town. The city remembered, and it was full.